How's it going, YouTube? Welcome to the What You Need to Catch Trout in Colorado Spinning Gear Edition series. This is going to be part one of a maybe 3 or 4 part series, and we're going to be talking about the equipment that we fish and really go in depth about how we fish it. So today is going to be all about rods and reels. Today's episode specifically, there's going to be no affiliation to the companies that we're going to be talking about. We fish a lot, and we just really want to talk to you guys about what works for us, and hopefully it can work for you too. So today's all about rods and reels. And when it comes to rods and reels, there's a multitude of things to look at, multitude of things to choose from, and it can be quite confusing when you're going to the store. So today we're really going to be talking about what rods and reels you need to concern yourself with and what you really need to be looking at, what factors, so to speak, when you're choosing a rod and reel for trout. So the first factor we're going to be discussing today is the power of the rod. Now when we're talking about the power of the rod, that talks about the pressure it takes to bend or flex the rod itself. Right now I have an ultralight right here, bends pretty far down as you can see. And when it comes to power, rods you're looking at are ultralight, light, medium, medium heavy, heavy, and very heavy. The only thing that we need to be concerning ourselves when it comes to trout fishing is medium and down. I fish medium light, sometimes light if I'm doing creeks, but generally what you need to concern yourself is a rod that's medium or down. When you're trout fishing, you're not really using heavy equipment or heavy line, so you really don't need to use a medium heavy or a heavy type rod. Really getting down to that ultralight even is a good way to go. Again, I tend to gravitate toward medium to medium light. Some of the trout in my area get pretty big, and especially if I'm fishing in rivers with strong currents, having a little extra backbone certainly does help get those fish in. Now the next thing we really want to look at when it comes to picking a fishing rod for trout is the action. The action is defined as where the bend starts at the rod tip. No matter what kind of length, or no matter what kind of power of a rod you get, you really want to get a fast action tip or an extra fast action tip when it comes to trout fishing. Trout are an amazingly fun fish species to get after, and some days, they are just smashing your lure. They're gonna hit it like a truck. Some days they're really finicky. Some days they're just gonna nip at it. Sometimes they'll pick it up and you'll barely even feel it. Having that fast action rod tip, that really is gonna help you feel those really finicky bites. That's gonna help you feel those nips. That's gonna lead you to feeling that bite more, which is going to lead you to setting that hook a lot more promptly, which is also in turn going to lead you to hooking into more fish. Now the next thing I really want to get into is the length of the rod. Okay, now this can really vary, and for me, it really depends on the type of water that I'm fishing. When it comes to fishing creeks or streams, really small bodies of water, I tend to use anything from a 4'8", which is kind of what I've been holding for this demonstration. I got other rods here that I'll be showing you as well, all the way up to a 6'6". Now you can go up to a 7 foot or plus for that, but when you're fishing creeks and streams, that can be a little bit of overkill. A lot of those creeks and streams you can hop over, and some of them you can even step over. So you don't really need that extra length, and having that short rod really help you with a lot more control when it comes to fishing those small bodies of water. The other thing too when it comes to fishing those small bodies of water, obviously sacrificing a little casting distance, which you don't really need too much of for accuracy, is a big thing, but you're also tend to be dealing with, at least in my area when it comes to creek fishing and stream fishing, lots of foliage along the sides of it. All right, walking up and down that sometimes can be a pain in the butt, and having a shorter rod can really help with that. So we've talked creeks and streams. Let's now talk about rivers and lakes, which I'm sure most of you guys are going to be fishing if you come out to do some trout fishing here in Colorado. When it comes to rivers and lakes, I tend to use a much longer rod. I don't like to use anything lower than a 6'6", and most of the time I'm using a 7 foot plus. My favorite rod I like to use is a 7'2" medium light 6-gill lichen. This is a great rod. It's extra sensitive. It's got that fast action tip. The 7 foot rod, guys, that's going to give you a lot more extra casting distance, and on top of it giving you more extra casting distance, you'll have more accuracy casting further distances compared to a short rod. This can be very important for hitting targets that are quite a ways away, or even in some instances, fishing targets that are across the river. All right, I've caught a number of trout seeing a hole or seeing a rapid across the river, casting across it, just getting into it, getting a quick jerk as it's hitting the water, and have a trout come up and smash it. So having a longer rod for lakes and rivers, I think, is a big must. I would not go anything lower than 6'6". I personally recommend going 7 foot, 7'2", maybe even 7'4" if you can. So the next thing we need to discuss, of course, is what kind of fishing reel you need for trout fishing. Now, when it comes to fishing reels, It doesn't really matter the brand, okay? One thing you really need to make sure you're concerning yourself with is the size of the reel. Something that kind of gets overlooked a lot when it comes to fishing in general, especially for trout fishing. The size of the reel that you really want to go no bigger than is probably 3,500 or 30.5. Reason being, that's meant for heavier line, heavier lures, just bigger fish. And if you go bigger than 3,500 and you're using light line, you can tend to get some rat nests or have that thing just fly off in the wind. Having a lower size reel is really a big component when it comes to trout fishing because you're generally using 4 to maximum 8 pound tests. Typically the size of a reel that I fish is 2,000 to 3,000. I have one reel that's 3,500, but I really just don't use it anymore. The 2,000 to 2,500 I think is that really good sweet spot when you're fishing for trout. Also remember, when we're talking sizes of the reel, okay, there's 2 types of general listings for that. There's the type of size I was talking about with 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 with the 500s in between. But there's also a listing where it says 10, 20, 30. 10 means 1,000, 20 means 2,000, so on and so forth. Now ratio is a big one. Now like my rod length size, my ratio size on my reel, it really depends on what type of water that I'm fishing and how I'm gonna be fishing it. Don't worry everybody, I know I've been going over different specifics about rods and reels, and if you're in the market for one, I'm gonna have some general listings here toward the end, and I'll be discussing the setups that I use as well. When it comes to fishing rivers everybody, I tend to do a lot of downstream fishing, meaning that I cast downstream and I'm reeling up through the current. Okay, casting upstream, of course, the current's coming down toward you, and that's the difference between those two. In part 2 of this series, which will be coming out in about a week, I'll be discussing lures and my favorite lures and how to fish them. But the lures I tend to use generally have great action and movement on them. So when I'm slow reeling up through the current, cranking or jerk fishing, then the current does a lot of the work for me. But when I am fishing that way, I tend to use a more low ratio reel. This right here is a 7-foot medium, and I got this on an Abu Garcia size 20 Black Max. Okay, this is a 4-to-1 gear ratio reel, 4 ball bearings in it, and it doesn't do a lot of fast cranking. And if you want to do that, you'll be cranking really fast. But if I'm fishing downstream, okay, I don't need, like I said, a lot of fast cranking action, okay? Even if I'm twitch fishing, okay, that current, when it hits the dive bill of the lure, really does a lot of the work for me. So a lot of times when especially if I'm cranking, okay, I like to do a very, very slow reel and have that current really do the work for me and have that lure moving slow through that water. Now on the other hand, if I'm doing more upstream fishing, I like to have a lot more of a faster rod. Okay, if I'm casting upstream all day, the last thing I want to do is just keep cranking and cranking and cranking all day, because then my arm's going to get tired at just about an hour into it. So if I'm fishing upstream and I'm just cranking, then I'm going to use a lot more of a faster reel. This is a 7-to-1 Lew's TLC custom speed spin reel. All right, this does a great job when I'm jerk fishing upstream or if I'm cranking upstream, because if you just have that lure sitting there and going through, let's say, sideways, you know, that can just kill your presentation. Having that tension on the line when you need it to get there as fast as you can be a really big component when it comes to landing those trout upstream. So again, to summarize that, lower end ratio reels for downstream fishing, okay, you really don't need to use that action on your arms as much. And if you're going upstream fishing mostly for the day, make sure you're using more of a high ratio reel so you're not wearing your arms out as fast. That's why generally if I'm going fishing on the river, I'm bringing 2 rod and reel combos, 1 fast, 1 slow. So we discussed rivers, and rivers are a lot for me like creeks and streams. I'm fishing them typically the same way, except the only difference is I'm only gonna bring a low end ratio reel, something 4-to-1, 5-to-1, because even if I'm casting upstream in that, the current's not moving very fast, and just a few twitches is typically all I need, and those couple fast reels will get that slack back to me pretty quick. You're not really going to be fishing generally very aggressive when it comes to jerking or cranking when it comes to fishing those shallower situations. So let's discuss lakes and ponds, still bodies of water. So when it comes to that reel choice really depends too on what type of fishing I'm going to be doing. I typically am doing only a few different types of techniques when it comes to doing trout fishing, and both your rod and reel setups that I was discussing for rivers will work out great for the lakes as well. If I'm going to be doing a lot of jerk fishing or twitch fishing, and I know that's going to be what's going to be hitting for most of the day, I'm going to be using a faster end reel. Mostly just due to having to reel in that slack, twitching, reeling in that slack. That can wear out your arms pretty quick if you're just cranking and cranking and cranking. So jerk fishing, using a much higher ratio reel. But when it comes to doing bottom fishing, guys, if you're using live worms, soft plastics, slow swimming swim baits, okay, trout worms, Low end ratio reel, probably where you want to go, 4-to-1. You don't need to get anything that's 7-to-1 for that because you're typically fishing that pretty slow anyway, and having a slow crank, okay? If I have a 7-to-1, I'm really trying to slow crank, then I'm kind of moving at that speed. If I got a 4-to-1, okay, I can afford to go a little bit faster and it feels like more of a natural movement for me. That's, I guess, more of a comfort type thing, and that's something that you have to decide for yourself, but that's generally what I prefer. And another good thing about low gear ratios, okay, 4-to-1s, even 3-to-1, stuff like that, they tend to be a lot cheaper. So generally, this Black Max, this Abu Garcia Black Max size 20, I've been using this same one for several years now. Done little maintenance on it and it still works great. You can see the wear on the reel itself just from banging against rocks in the ground and stuff like that. I could take better care of my equipment. When it comes to rods and reels, you know, you're really looking for a few factors. You're not really looking for the brand name. Look for the factors itself, and then you can make decisions based on brand as you get more experienced. So we've talked about rods and reels, a couple different types of things throughout this episode, and if you're only in the market for one rod and reel and you're really looking for that one general sweet spot, then let's talk about that really quick. So the way we'll get into that is we'll talk about the rod and reel setups that I typically use, and we'll talk about the pricings of those, and then we'll also talk about some lower end options you can choose that have worked well for me in the past. A couple of the rod and reels that I've been holding throughout this is this first one. It's a 7-foot medium 6-scale lichen series. All right, this rod is amazing. It's extra sensitive, it's durable. I actually have a review video for this lichen series here on the channel. I'll leave that link up above. Go check that out. I won't get into too many details since I've done a video on this before, but this 7-foot medium rod is great, all right? It is great. Have that paired with the 20 size Abu Garcia Black Max. Have had this reel for years, works tremendous. If you're looking for more of a lower end rod, okay, if you're looking for a lower end rod, don't forget about the Ugly Stik GX2. Everybody knows about Ugly Stik if you've gotten into fishing even for a little bit. And these Ugly Stik GX2 rods with the fast action tip, they work tremendous, all right? Great beginner rod, great intermediate rod as well. If you don't fish a lot, then I seriously would recommend getting this, especially if you're not trying to shell out a lot of money. The 6-scale lichen, these typically run about $230 a piece. So for some people that is quite a bit of money to spend on a fishing rod, and that's completely understandable. So again, get the GX2, it is a fraction of the cost. The other rod and reel setup that I use is a 7'2" medium light. Again, 6-scale lichen series, check that review video out. This rod is amazing. I have that paired on here with a TLC 2000 Speed Spin Custom. All right, works really great, awesome reel from Lew's. And with these two setups, I mean, this is 95% of what I'm using when it comes to fishing. Now, if I'm trying to use a smaller rod, I talked about creek fishing, stream fishing, lowering your rod to a 4'8", even to up to a 6'6". All you have to do is take those reels, unscrew them from one, put them right onto the other, and you're good to go. All right, I'm using the same fishing line for both. I'm using typically 4 to 8 pound fluorocarbon. 95% of the time I'm using 4 to 6 pound fluorocarbon. The only time I go up to 8 is if I'm using my sponsor's brand, Lucky One, and that is 8 pound monofilament, but it's at 6 pound diameter. We'll talk about fishing line, of course, in another part of the series, but I hope you guys have enjoyed what I talked about today. I've tried to bring as much value as I could when it comes to rods and reels and what works for me. Like the video if you guys enjoyed it or if you found it informational. Make sure to subscribe if you're new, and leave me a comment if there's anything that I forgot, anything that you think I should have included as far as some details go. Let me know, okay? But I hope you guys enjoyed, and keep a lookout for part 2 of the series. We're gonna be outside and we're gonna be discussing lures and how to fish them.